Hey guys, Comic Boom here to review The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. Guys, this is a story, a new series written by Ram V. And I gotta tell you, I'm pretty impressed with it. It's Ram V, art by Filipe Andrade, Filipe Andrade. In any event, this is great. You know, Ram V has been doing a fantastic job over at DC. He's the writer of Swamp Thing, of Catwoman, of Justice League Dark. I mean, the guy's been just doing a tremendous job. And here he's come out here with The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. And I have to tell you, the variant covers here are just gorgeous. The standard cover artist, Filipe Andrade, who is also the interior artist. The art definitely fits the mood and the tone of the comic book, which I'll get to in a moment. But David Mack, his variant covers here are really good. The variant covers look just great. You can Google them online. Just Google in The Many Deaths of Laila Starr #1, and you'll see the various covers pop up. It's very impressive. It's a very impressive debut. There's even, I'm not showing it, but there's even a nice foil cover that your local comic shop probably has. It's just gorgeous. David Mack cover. It looks like a silver reflective foil cover, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. I'm not even sure if it's foil, but it's just eye popping, and it's just absolutely gorgeous. So, well, who exactly is Laila Starr? Well, the interesting thing about this story is it deals with death, and death itself has been essentially called into God's office because God's he's like a corporate CEO, and God has decided, or rather, the corporate powers that be, and I guess God is the CEO of a corporation. Think of heaven and all things that exist as being a large conglomerate corporation, and they've decided to basically lay death off. And that's what's so interesting about it. And it's the god of life is this. It's death. I mean, the god of life is this guy named Prana, and of course, the god of death is death herself. But she's been laid off. God calls death into her office and says, thanks for coming out, but we really don't need you anymore. We've had some corporate layoffs. We just don't need you anymore. We appreciate it, but you just don't. We don't need you. And what writer Ramvi does, what's very interesting here, is that he sets this up because he gives us various snapshots of different people in the world going about their lives. He shows us a young child being born in a hospital. We see a young teenager about to ultimately commit suicide, and we see traffic. We see a very busy world, a busy city, and you can imagine if death takes a holiday. But this isn't death taking a holiday. This is death being fired. It's like, thank you, death, but we're not going to have any more death on the planet. See, God explains to death that apparently corporate has decided that, well, there's going to be a child being born, and this child is going to usher in immortality to the world. I guess eternal life, I guess you could say it. I'm not entirely sure where it's going, but it's really fascinating how Ramvi takes these sort of higher philosophical religious concepts from various religious mythologies and perhaps more specifically from maybe his own religion. I've be really curious to talk with Ram V about it. I know that my buddy Dark Knight Nation has interviewed Ram V, and I believe so is my other friend Jason Comic Source, and I'll leave the links for those interviews below, and you can check them out. But fascinating about this is called The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. Now, you can imagine that Death's a little upset by this because, as she says, like, what's going on, and God says it's not personal. We're restructuring the whole department. Well, that might be well and good, but what does Death do? I mean, what does Death do after Death's fired? And, God gives Death a pamphlet that says, it says, a mortal world of possibilities, a helpful guide for an extraordinary life after godhood. In other words, what do you do after godhood? Well, apparently the reward is to be made mortal and to live a mortal life, to be able to experience the pains and the pleasures of being human. And I find that very interesting because there's often, I know there's different religious concepts out there, but the idea that life is the process of remembering who we truly are, that Buddhists say, for example, that, life is suffering. Suffering is an essential part of life. It's through the suffering, it's getting through it, that you remember you really are, and you embrace the suffering, and you work through it, just like you work through fear. Suffering is not real. Other things are not real. But it's the experience of life itself that you really come into tune with who you are. How can you truly appreciate greatness unless you've sunk really low? How do you appreciate good without experiencing a little bit of bad? That kind of thing. Now, whether you agree or disagree with that or not, I can tell you this, that what I like about what Ram V does here is that he sort of really he goes full throttle with that. And this Laila Starr, when death goes to Earth and to live her life, and in the form of Laila Starr, she ends up taking over this body of this teenager that has essentially committed suicide. And this kid's been dead for 20 minutes already. But she assumes the body of this teenager and ultimately escapes the hospital, only to die again and come back. And this time, the only reason she survived and came back this time was because of Prana, the god of life, who basically rescues her. And I have to tell you, they have an interesting conversation because she doesn't know what she's going to do. I mean, she's used to basically being immortal, invulnerable, and she's not even used to aches and pains. And now she's got to live the life of an immortal. She's got to live the life of immortal and hearken in and look forward to everyone on the planet apparently ushering a new age of immortality where there's no death anymore. So it's going to be a very, very different world very, very soon, because this new child that is born is going to grow up to usher in this new age of immortality. So almost like a second coming, if it were. Now, Laila Starr wants to reach a point where she gets very angry, and because she used to be deaf, she didn't really have a strong connection probably to her base emotions. So her first instincts were to find this child and to kill this child. And if this child's going to be born that's going to usher in immortality, she's out of a job. But if this child fails, corporate will likely hire death back, because look, this immortality thing isn't working out. They would probably hire death back, because it's just like if you lay off an employee because that department's been eliminated. Well, if you suddenly need that department again, you're probably going to rehire the staff you let go, along with an apology, right? I mean, come on, sorry about that. Come on back. We'll even give you a raise. I think that's what death is thinking about, what Laila Starr is thinking about. Now, interesting what happens, of course, that Laila can't bring herself to kill this child. She's human now. She's in human form. She can't bring herself to kill this child. And so in her panic, she just runs out of the hospital, ends up getting killed, resurrected again by Prana, the god of life. And that is really the opening issue. And at one point, Prana says near the end to her, the god of life says to Laila, look, I only give these humans a lifetime, every one of them. What they do with it is between them and you, I suppose. Meaning that, look, I'm the god of life. I give life, but I don't tell people what to do with their lives. What they do with their lives is between them and essentially death. So it would appear that even Prana himself, even the god of life, is a little bit confused about, why is corporate doing this? Why eliminate death? Because it does throw a wrench into what life means. If suddenly we're immortal, that really changes the scope of things. And in fact, it reminds me a little bit what's going on right now in the Way of X issue over in Marvel with the X-Men. The Way of X issue dealing with how mutants deal with immortality. And Nightcrawler is really struggling with some very deep philosophical questions with very serious consequences. If you can live forever and you know you can be resurrected and you can never die, well, you're likely to be a lot more frivolous and carefree with your life if you don't have to worry about getting harmed or killed anymore. It has a profound impact on how one can look at life and all the decisions that you make. Now, I find it interesting that we're also dealing with themes of immortality and the meaning of life here in Laila Starr. It's called The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. And so, presumably, one can only assume that, I mean, Laila dies at least once in this issue, theoretically twice, but, well, I guess once. And she's likely going to have subsequent deaths in her struggle to come to terms with not only what does life mean now for every human on the planet now that immortality is going to be ushered in, but what does life mean for death? When death itself is gone and you're the embodiment of death, what meaning does your life take on when you've only been death? And it's interesting. It's an interesting question. And it's one of those things where even if I don't get the answers, and I expect Ram V will have some answers, it's sort of like the enjoyment of this comic is that we get to live the question. You know, it's like that. One of my favorite poets, Rilke, says, embrace the question, learn to live the questions themselves, and you'll find yourself one day living into the answer. And so I think death here has to literally live into the answers that she's looking for. And that's what I think Ramvi does beautifully here. Artist Philip Andrade does a really good job here. He conveys the mood real well. I find it really interesting how he draws God. God almost looks like I think maybe that's the East Indian version of God. Forgive my ignorance. But it's got like a multi-headed God as the CEO, and he's got an overly sized head. It's quite good, and it's done with just this mood and this tone and the coloring scheme. It's all very specifically geared for the tone. Up in heaven, I mean, it's bright inside the corporate offices where Death gets laid off, or I guess fired by God himself, or the CEO, and she's she's very frustrated. You could tell she's a very busy person. I mean, you can imagine if you're Death, you're very busy. You're always doing something. You get a really sense of the hectic life of Death. And she's got no idea why she's being called to head office, and she's frustrated. And she goes there. She finds out she's fired. She's basically shell shocked, really, is what it is. And she manipulates another lower CEO, a lower person in the corporate echelon, to sort of put her back on Earth, close to where this child is going to be born that will usher in immortality. And while all this is happening, the plots, it's easy to follow, it's easy to read, and it poses all these interesting questions. I really think this is something that it's well worth the pickup, and I encourage everyone to get this. You have your choices from a wide range of different covers here. So if you are into speculation, this isn't just great cover art, but this is great story spec as well. So again, it's Ram V's really I would consider one of his first independent works. And this is a guy that's earned his stripes. He's really good at posing deeper philosophical questions, and he's really great at character work, as he has shown on his Swamp Thing and in his Catwoman and in his Justice League Dark. I think this guy's earned our attention, people. So I do encourage everybody to check out the Many Deaths of Laila Starr. And until next time, guys, hit the subscribe button. Follow me on Twitter at Metropolis40. And Comic Boom out.